And so here we are in the throes of right in the middle. We've just had the conventions, and go to the next slide. Here are our choices. Here are our choices, and election 2016. Now you may hear people, and I'm sure you've heard this if you watch any sort of news. Any sort of news, you've heard this phrase. This is the most important election in the history of our country. You may have heard this, and you may believe that. In fact, this guy named Dennis Prager, I don't know. Here's what he said. The usual description of presidential elections, the most important in our lifetime, is true this time, he wrote. He put, in fact, it may be the most important election since the Civil War and possibly since America's founding. But here's the problem. Next slide. This is actually the campaign he was talking about. Interesting to anybody? I'll raise my hand. This is actually that was the most important election since the Civil War until this one. In fact, I read more pundits who said the year 2010, the mid-election, was the most important. In fact, I even found somebody who said that in the year 2000, that was the most important election in the history of the world was the year 2000. Now, does it mean that this election isn't important? No, that is not what I am saying. Don't hear what I am not saying. What I am saying is we say it all the time. So what do we do with that, right? What do we do with that? Is it this one? It's the most important one until the year 2020. And then that'll be the most important of our lifetime. And then that'll be the most important until the year 2024 or in the mid-elections, whatever. So why do I say that? Because I think we need to just take a breath. We just need to breathe a little bit here. Here's the hard part about elections. They don't happen in a vacuum. They don't happen in a vacuum. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is they happen in a certain time, in a certain place, in a certain location in the world, and in a certain time in history. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just think we have to understand that that's the way it happens. Because you see, even when Jesus came, he didn't come to earth in a vacuum. And what I mean a vacuum, like there's nothing else going on in the world. It's just Jesus and nothing else is happening. There was a lot happening even when Jesus was on the planet. And it caused, and this is going to be hard to believe, but there were political parties back then. And based on your political party, it caused them to believe certain things about Jesus. It caused them to have strong emotions about Jesus and who he was, or Messiah and what Messiah should be. And what's so unfortunate is because of their political party affiliation, they didn't see him. They missed it. Man, if that should be like, because of their political party association, they missed that the Messiah, Son of God, was right in front of him. Now, we've talked about this before, but let's talk about the political parties. And so when Jesus came into the world, there was actually four major political parties in the Jewish culture of that day. And they all had an idea about what it meant for Messiah to be Messiah. And they were so opinionated. I know this is hard to believe, but some of them actually thought they were right and nobody else was. In fact, they got to the point where they hated the other parties. And they would have disputes. I know it's hard to believe, but they were right. They had it together. I mean, why would they do that? It's hard for me to fathom political parties having fights about things. Sarcasm to the fullest degree. So let's review what these groups were. The first one were this group called the Essenes, and I probably spelled it wrong, but you get the idea. There may be two N's, but these guys were the separatists. They moved out to the desert. They moved out of the town. They didn't want anything to do with what was happening in the political culture, and so they said, what we believe Messiah wants us to do is to get away from everything, to separate ourselves from all the world and everything that's going on. So we're going to move out here, kind of circle the wagons, and we're going to set up camp, and then Messiah will come, and when he sees that we've kind of gotten rid of everything, and so we're just going to set up camp here. And so these guys were the separatists, and you don't hear much about them in the gospel because Jesus was in the city. And they were. Okay. I'm going to use a lot of sarcasm today, so just get, you know what I'm saying? Like, just buckle up. We're going there. And we can laugh. It's okay. The next group were the zealots. And these guys, you wanted to be on their side because all they wanted to do was pick a fight. They were ready to go to war. And they believed that, man, if we go pick a fight with Rome, God will see our passion and he will come and he will deliver us. And so let's go fight. Let's slit a few Roman throats and let's get after this. And then Messiah will come and set up his kingdom. The Sadducees, I'm not going to do my joke, so don't worry about it. And the Sadducees were the people, they were actually considered the liberals of the day. They were kind of way on the left side of what others would think. And their whole thought was, it doesn't matter. Just do whatever you want to. It doesn't matter. Just get in and get all the money you can, whatever, and because nothing's going to happen. They didn't believe in the afterlife and the resurrection and what that would look like. And so it was all about today and getting what you can today. And then the Pharisees, we hear the most about. They were the conservatives of the day, and they were all about law, and you got to follow this law specifically. And what God's waiting to do is he's waiting for us to be pure and holy so that he can then come as Messiah. And we got to get rid of all the sinners. We got to get rid of the people who commit adultery and the tax collectors, and we got to get them out so that God will then come after we've purified ourselves. A lot of priestly understanding of Pharisees. You know what's interesting? They all had a problem with Jesus. Every single one of them. And you know what's really interesting? Jesus had a problem with all of them too. They looked at Jesus, and Jesus didn't fit into this category nice and neat, so he can't be a Pharisee, right? And he didn't fit into this category, so because he's talking about resurrection of the dead and what that looks like, and he talked about loving enemies. What? And he talked about you engage people, even people that aren't like you. And so all of these people saw, because of their political bias, missed the Messiah. So what do we do? How do we faithfully live in our political cycle that we currently find ourselves in as the people of God? I'm glad you asked. Now, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, and I'm not going to tell you what should be important for you to vote for. Some people have asked me, and I don't. And some people get frustrated with me, and that's cool too. And I should put on my email address. And if you want to come talk to me, like call me. If you have questions about what I say, it is an open door policy in my office because literally the door is always open. And but more specifically, I want to have conversation, and so we can go get coffee if you want to do that too. So that'd be awesome as well. And so if I say something and you're like, I don't know, come talk to me. I'd love it to talk to you. So let's look at 2 Kings chapter 4 is where we're going to begin today. We having fun yet? If you get there, if you don't mind standing. If you don't have a Bible, there's a pew Bible, and the page number will be on the screen for the passage today. We're going to start reading at verse 1 of 2 Kings chapter 4. Stand as we read God's word in the honor of the reading God's word. Verse 1, the wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves. Elisha replied to her, how can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? Your servant has nothing there at all, she said, except a little olive oil. Elisha said, go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it on one side. She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, bring me another one. But he replied, there is not a jar left. Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, go, sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left. This is the word of God. Next slide for the people of God. And you said, thanks be to God. You may be seated this morning. Let's pray one more time. God, we're going to need you in these next few moments that we get to spend together, to open our eyes, to open our hearts, to open our lives to whatever it is you want to say to us this morning. We can do this. We can make it through the next couple of months, but only if your Spirit guides and leads us like never before. So God, we need you to speak I always think about this story when I'm like pumping gas or when my tank's on empty. I'm like, God, keep it flowing. You know what I'm saying? Like, keep it flowing. Maybe nobody else does that. Why this story? Because I think that what's happening in Second Kings and what's happening in our world and what's happened since the beginning of the world is you have what man wants to do and how man chooses to rule, and then you have like God's kingdom. And sometimes they go together, but most often that God's kingdom is different than anything this world has to offer. Whether we like it or not, it's true because it's from the Bible, not because I'm saying it. That Jesus says there's a different way, a better way, that you have your two parties or your four parties or whatever, how many you want to have down here, but there's a higher way, a better way. When the Pentecost happened, you know what they called the church? The way. They didn't call it the church, they called it the way. Meaning that we are walking in the way of Jesus, and that's going to supersede anything else, period. The way. We're going to walk in that. So why this? Because in 2 Kings, what the writer is doing so beautifully and brilliantly shows us that there's ways that kings choose to rule and reign, and then there's ways that God chooses to rule and reign in the world. There's ways that kings choose to go about their business, and there's ways that God chooses to go about his business. And most often, sometimes they're dynamically opposed to each other. And so what it is for us is to figure out who God's calling us to be and how he wants us to live so that we can live faithfully. And so to understand why this story is important and why this story is here, this story of the widow's oil, we have to see what the story before it is. We have to understand the context of why this story has such significance for the people of God. We have to read the story before. And so you have to understand the people are kind of in exile. They've been conquered. Elijah has just been taken up to heaven. Swing low, sweet chariot. You know what I'm saying? Like the chariot came and took him up to heaven. And now Elisha is the prophet. And so that's where we are. And the story right before this, all you bald people will love it. You know, they're making fun of Elisha because he's bald and he calls out bears, right, to get rid of the kids. I'm sorry, it's in the Bible. I didn't write it, but it's just there. And so then we read 2 Kings chapter 3. 2 Kings chapter 3. Let's look at this story. So fascinating to me. Joram, son of Ahab, became king of Israel and Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and he reigned 12 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father and mother had. So he's not as bad as they are, but he still did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did get rid of the idols and the stones of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from them. Verse 4, now Mesha, king of Moab, raised sheep, and he had to pay the king of Israel a tribute of 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But after Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So Moab, they owed Israel some sheep and some oil, and after the Ahab died, they decided they weren't going to pay him. So at the time, King Joram set out from Samaria and mobilized all of Israel. He also sent this message to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. Hey, the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? I will go with you, he replied. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. By what route shall we attack, he asked. Through the desert of Edom, he answered. All right, so that's the story is Moab owes Israel some sheep and some ram's oil. A new king comes up and he says, we're not going to pay it. And he's like, well, let's go get our oil and our sheep. Let's go get our sheep. And so then let's read on. And then they're like, okay, where are we going to go? Let's go through the desert. Not a great idea. You know what I'm saying? Like, they weren't using their brain a whole lot. Because let's read what happens. Verse 9. So the king of Israel set out with the king of Judah and the king of Edom. After a roundabout march of 7 days, the army had no more water for themselves or the animals with them. They didn't bring enough water. Have you ever been to a desert? No water. No water. I lived in a desert for like 4 years. No water. So they go through, let's go through the desert. Hey, maybe we should pack some more water. Nope. Let's go. So they get out there, no water for the troops or the animals. Let's read on. What? Exclamation point. That's why I said it like that. Exclaimed the king of Israel, has the Lord called us 3 kings together only to deliver us into the hands of Moab? Now, what is missing here? What is missing? Okay, I'll tell you. This speaks volumes about why this story and the next story is so huge. Did God ever tell them, hey, go and defeat Moab? Hey, you need to go get your sheep. Is it anywhere in the first little bit where they had a voice from God saying, hey, you should go do this? No! Why are they doing it? Because they decided it was best for them, because they decided it was what was appropriate for them, not because God had told them to go do it. What? Has God left us? We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. Let's read on. Verse 11, but Jehoshaphat asked, is there no prophet of the Lord here through whom we may inquire of the Lord? An officer of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. He used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. I love this. Elisha said to the king of Israel, why do you want to involve me? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. No, the king of Israel answered, because it is the Lord who called us 3 kings together to deliver us into the hands of Moab. Oh, lie number 1. No, because God told us to do this. Really? Where? Where do you read that? Where did that come into play? Okay, verse 14. This is great. I love the people of God in the Bible because they have kind of a snarky attitude sometimes. You know, listen to this. Elijah, verse 14, said, as surely as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, if I do not have respect for the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not pay attention to you. So if I didn't respect Jehoshaphat, you're out of luck here. But now bring me a harpist. Summon the musicians. That is awesome. And then the rest of the story goes that God says, you know what? I didn't command them to do this, but they are my people, and I will not let them die of thirst in the desert. And so he says, hey, when you wake up in the morning, the valley is going to be filled with water. And sure enough, they woke up in the morning, and there was water all in the valley of the desert. And in fact, what happened is Moab then woke up in the morning and looked down, and because of the way the sand reflected on the water and what it looked like it was red. And they thought that the Israelite army had actually defeated themselves. And it was a pool of blood that was actually in the valley of the, and so they go down, and we're like, well, let's go get all their loot, right? Let's go get all the stuff that they left behind. And when they showed up, the people had water, and they actually defeated the Moabite army. And let's look at verse 26. When the king of Moab saw that the battle had gone against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen to break through the king of Edom, but they fell. So he went against Moab, and he fell. Then he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him as king, listen to this, and offered him as a sacrifice on the city wall. The fury against Israel was great. They withdrew and returned to their own land. Notice what it doesn't say. They didn't get the sheep. They went into a battle, got in trouble, looked at God and said, hey, this is your fault. What's going on here? And the very thing they were going after to begin with, they turned back and didn't get the sheep. Now let's contrast that with verse 1 of chapter 4. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha. Listen to her posture. Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor's coming to take my 2 sons as his slaves. Start with reverence for the Lord. Start with, hey, this is my husband, and he served the Lord in all things. The whole part about taking the sons, that the husband was kind of the one who was the breadwinner, and he would farm or do whatever to make money, and when the husband died, it was up to the sons to be a part of that. And so what this text is saying is that if this guy comes and takes the sons as a slave, the widow has no way of making income, no way of providing for herself, no way of supporting herself, and will probably end up on the streets. And Elisha's respond in verse 2, how can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house? In the world of kings, we go fight battles because they suit us and they're better for us. In the world of God, he takes a little bit of olive oil and he turns it into something huge. In the story of kings, we go and we fight battles because they prop up us. In the story, we revere the Lord, and the Lord takes the little that we have and he turns it into something for his honor and his glory and his purpose and his plan. Different stories. So, I think another big point, so here we go. I think another big the story is this: the people get in a jam and they try to fit God into the mess that they're already in, rather than starting with who God is and then living into that story. And I think we do that sometimes in our world. I know that's hard to believe, but I think we do. And I think that I want to use some of these guys here. Let's use this dude. Here's what we do. Sometimes what we do is, so we're studying and we're reading, and we should do that, and I do that way probably too much than I should, but I read all the time. But sometimes when we start to read and study, it goes something like this, that we start and we think, oh man, this is a great idea, because this person said it, or this person spoke about it, or this person whatever. And then what we do is we try to fit God into that idea. And so from the book, a quote from the book, let's go to the next slide, is this. I'll just read it up here. How many times in our own lives do we set plans in motion only to try and cram God in later, or develop some kind of theological rationale for our actions? So what we do, I love it, is we start here. We think, oh man, this guy is awesome. And once again, I read all kinds of people. But here's the problem, is we start with an idea or a whatever, and we say, okay, this guy said it. And then we say, okay, well, what did this guy say about it? Awesome, perfect, man, that's so great, that's so helpful. And then we eventually get to cross. We read it backwards. We start there, and we work our way back to the cross, when I think what God is saying and what Jesus is saying is, what you actually need to do is start here. And then work your way to where we currently find ourselves. Because if you start here, then you're fitting and you're packing, and you're like, oh man, this guy said this, and it kind of fits with what this guy said. And then you think, man, but I love what this guy says, but how do I make this fit into that? Rather than saying, hey, here's what Jesus said. Here's how Jesus lived. Here is who Jesus was. And I can only understand what everybody else said if I start there rather than starting here. Does that make sense? So we have to start with Jesus. We have to read everything in light of him. We have to start with who Jesus was, how he acted, and we can't add anything that doesn't fit with that in the understanding of who he is. Because I think that we believe Jesus is like God. And that Jesus said, if you want to see the Father, just look at me. And so if we're going to understand more about who God is, we start with Jesus. And we work our way forward from him rather than starting where we are and trying to fit Jesus into what we think. Brian Zahn, we've had this quote before, but I love it. It says this: God is like Jesus. God has always been like Jesus. There's never been a time when God was not like Jesus. We have not always known what God was like, but now we do. Too often we start with a party. We try to read back. Too often we start with an idea and we try to read back. Too often we start with where we are and try to work our way backwards rather than starting where Jesus is and working our way to where we are. I was talking to somebody recently about politics. Nobody in this room, so don't take a deep breath. And about political issues, and we were talking about a particular issue, and I asked the question, I said, all right, where do you see Jesus in this? And Jesus saying that this is okay. And then said person said, well, I believe I have the right. I said, okay, that's cool. But I think if we're followers of Jesus, that he's the example. He's the model, right? If we're following Jesus, he's the one that we are trying to be like. And so if it doesn't fit with that, we either have to say, this is more important, or Jesus is more important. Come on, people. I'm not trying to ruffle your feathers, although I might be ruffling a few. It's either Jesus' way or there's another way. Yeah, but I have my rights because, all right, that's cool. I'm not saying you don't. All I'm saying is it's got to fit with Jesus somewhere, or it shouldn't maybe fit in our life. I know that's radical. So how do we look at this? What does this mean for us today? It reminds me of the story it's this really small story in the Old Testament that we don't read and preach about a lot. I love it. It's found in Joshua chapter 5. So the people are getting ready to go into to fight Jericho, to battle Jericho. And Joshua is getting away to pray, right? Like, because, man, we're fighting. We don't have a big enough army. The walls are huge. How are we going to do this? So he's getting away to pray. And when he's praying, he sees this mighty warrior with this drawn sword. And Joshua asks him the question, it's the best question in the world. Whose side are you on? Right? You gonna kill me, or am I gonna be okay? Whose side are you on? And this was the answer. You ready for this? Neither. But as commander of the army of the Lord, I'm standing before you. Neither. It reminds me of what Abraham Lincoln said one time. Abraham was Lincoln. Hey, whose side is God on? The North or the South? And it's like, well, of course, the South. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, that's not what he said. I'm from the South. You know, we're going to rise again someday. But whatever that means. So they asked Abraham Lincoln, whose side is God on? And this was what Abraham Lincoln said. Sir, my concern is not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side. For God is always right. Next slide. What is it about our politics that seems so much more urgent and real than the grand narrative of God's salvation that we preach every week? Why do we get so upset about Republican and Democrat when we're supposed to believe that God is the one that's transforming the world? God is the one that's going to bring about change. God is the one who has set in motion his plan of salvation. And you know what? 20 years from now, they're going to talk about the presidents. They're going to be dead, but he won't be. Right? Isn't that what this is all about anyways? We get so upset, like, how could you be this or how could you be that? Who cares? Be who God's called you to be. Let's leave it at that. I'm going to get ahead of myself. Okay. Next slide. The temptation, I love this, for many of us is to imagine that history is written by kings and kingdoms rather than by the kingdom of God. And we are fooled into thinking that history is written by the powerful and faithless rather than the power of God's faithfulness. Woo! Somebody needs to tweet that right now. That's good. It's not written by the powerful. It's written by the widow's oil is the one that changes the story of people of God. It's written by the lady who comes in and washes Jesus' feet. And she says, what she has done will be told about forever and ever and ever. That's what God's kingdom looks like. So what do? Our homeboy John Wesley has a little bit to say about this. Next slide. 1774. This is brilliant. From 1774. This is what John Wesley said. I met those of our society who had votes in the ensuing election and advised them to vote without fear or reward for the person they judge most worthy. To speak, this is where we struggle. Okay, I'll vote for who I think is the best. Great. Number 2, to speak no evil of the person they voted against. And here's even harder one. Number 3, to take care their spirits were not sharpened against those who voted on the other side. What was John Wesley saying? I think what he's saying on some level is, hey, take a breath. Jesus is Lord. Caesar is not. Jesus is Lord. Vote for who you think will be the best candidate. Woo! Go for it. But don't say anything evil about the other person. And for goodness sakes, don't say anything evil about people who may vote and think differently than you do. So Trump or Hillary? Whose side is God on? Neither. Neither. The question is, are we on his side? Are we on his side? Because if we are, I think it's in the Bible somewhere, that we'll be filled with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and self-control, even on Facebook, and love. Fruit of the Spirit. Those those who have the Christ-filled life, that is what should spill out. Let's pray. Paulding Nazarene, my brothers and sisters, may you go. And may we not get sidetracked into what story we think is really shaping our world. May we not get sidetracked and forget that God's Spirit, if it is in us, needs to pour out of us in